Of the working group on the program budget for 2025, Ambassador Ana Cristina Rodriguez Piñera from Guatemala. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning to everyone. Distinguished delegates, thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the discussions on the proposed program budget of the Court for 2025. We have made good progress and agreed almost on all elements of the draft resolution, but we do not yet have an agreement on the figures for the 2025 budget. I have convened several rounds of informal consultations during this Assembly session, and we will meet again as soon as this plenary session is finalized. I am grateful to all of those involved for their constructive and flexible attitude with which they have approached these negotiations. And I am very hopeful that we will find a consensus soon. And I urge all delegations to continue to work together towards that end. Thank you very much.
I thank you for this update and for your diligent efforts to lead the discussion to a successful conclusion. I wish you every success in bringing the mandate of the working group to a conclusion as soon as possible. I now give the floor to the coordinator of the informal consultations on the omnibus resolution, Ms. Beatrice Maillet, to brief the Assembly on the work of the omnibus resolution. You have the floor.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President.
I have the honor to report on the informal consultations regarding the resolution entitled Strengthening the International Criminal Court and the Assembly of State Parties, also known as the Omnibus Resolution. We held 9 meetings in New York and 1 further meeting here in The Hague yesterday. The outcome of our consultation is before you in document ICC ASP23 L7. The resolution consists of 22 sections as well as an annex containing the mandates for the intersessional period. A further annex contains an amendment to the resolution on the review of the procedure for the nomination and election of judges. As usual, a number of paragraphs in this text reflect the outcome of facilitations conducted in the framework of the New York Working Group and the Hague Working Group, as well as decisions of the Bureau. I'd like to draw your attention to the text of paragraph 28, which is a placeholder on the plenary debate on cooperation, which will be provided by the facilitators on cooperations in accordance with the usual practice. I am very pleased to say that the orange juice in the conference room yesterday was quite a success, since we now are capable to submit to you the draft resolution for consideration of the Assembly and express the hope that it will be adopted later today by consensus. Let me thank Karen, the ICC Liaison Office in New York, and her team for the support. I would like also to thank Christiane, the Director of the Secretariat here, and her team for the excellent support. I would like to also thank all facilitators through which in their journey were able to contribute to the omnibus resolution, but also sometimes along the way streamline this lengthy text. I would also like to thank all delegations for their active and constructive contribution and look forward to the adoption of the text. Thank you.
Thank you for this update and for your tireless engagement in reaching agreement on the omnibus resolution. I thank you also for introducing the draft omnibus resolution contained in document ICC-ASP23/L7. We will now turn to the introduction of the other draft resolutions of the 23rd session. I first give the floor to the state party representatives on the review mechanism, Ambassador Paul van den Eyssel of the Netherlands and Ambassador Michael Imran Kanu of Sierra Leone, who introduced the draft resolutions which the review mechanism has proposed. These resolutions, which are contained in documents ICC-ASP23/L3, L4 and L5 respectively, are entitled Draft Resolution of the Assembly of States Parties regarding the implementation of the tenure policy, Draft Resolution on the introduction of a moratorium on the recruitment by the International Criminal Court of staff of non-states parties' nationality, Draft Resolution on the review of the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system. You have the floor, ambassadors.
Thank you very much, Madam. And although sitting behind the nameplate of my country, I am speaking indeed as State Party representative. We have indeed the honor to introduce 3 draft resolutions. I will refrain from repeating the numbers, you have just mentioned them. The resolution on the implementation of a tenure policy, the resolution on the introduction of a moratorium, and the draft resolution on the review of the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system. Allow me to briefly give the conference an idea what the resolutions are about. The tenure resolution is the resolution on the introduction of a tenure policy as of the 1st January 2025, a tenure policy applicable to staff of the court at the P5 and director levels. The resolution would also adopt the amendments to the staff regulations and rules that are necessary to give legal effect to the tenure policy. The Assembly would decide to review the implementation of the policy within a period of 8 years and thereafter every 3 years, and it would request the Court to report annually to the ASP on the implementation of the policy, including on the use of the exemptions stated in the staff rules. Second, moratorium. The Assembly would decide, by adopting the resolution, the Assembly would decide that as of the 1st January 2025, there shall be a moratorium on the recruitment of staff of non-states parties' nationality at the P1 to P5 levels and director levels. The resolution further specifies that the moratorium shall not apply to certain categories of staff and non-staff positions. And for the details, I refer to the resolution. The resolution foresees that as an extraordinary measure, the prosecutor or the register may approve the recruitment of persons from non-state parties to meet exceptional operational needs. The duration of the moratorium would be 8 years, with a review undertaken at the halfway point, 4 years, and the result of the review would be reported to the 27th session of the Assembly. And while adopting the moratorium, we also have to amend previous resolutions, ICC ASP1 Res 10 and ICC ASP2 Res 2. And these amendments are set out in the annexes to the resolutions. The last resolution, Madam President, we introduced to this Assembly is the review of the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system. A lot of language has been used in previous resolutions, so I will not dwell on that. Main points of the resolution is that the Assembly would decide to conclude the mandate of the review mechanism after 4 years, and also in view of the status of the assessment of the 384 recommendations. There is one slight oral amendment I would like to make. In the operative paragraph 7, we say that all recommendations have been assessed, but as we have said several times during this conference, it's all but one, unfortunately. I assume that is a merely technical thing, but we want to be correct. We also, as I said, we decide to conclude the mandate of the review mechanism. Furthermore, by this resolution, the Assembly would request the Bureau, through its working groups, to continue and monitor further action on the implementation of the recommendations. And we had a discussion on that Wednesday afternoon. It would request the Bureau to determine the appropriate forum for overseeing the implementation of the recommendations on the topics for which we took responsibility during the review process, and these topics are working culture, relations with civil society and media, implementation of a 10-year policy, implementation of a moratorium, and the trust fund for victims. Finally, the resolution would request the ASP Secretary to keep the matrix on progress in the assessment of IAR recommendations updated and to circulate the matrix in advance of each Assembly session. Madam President, this is almost the last time you will hear from us as review mechanism. I will not give a long Oxford speech. We did that on Wednesday. I just would like to thank everyone for the spirit of collaboration, cooperation, constructiveness, flexibility that were presented throughout all our deliberations, but also during the deliberations that led to these 3 resolutions. This enabled us to agree the draft resolutions ad referendum on the 18th of November. We also thank the court for its guidance, the Secretariat, and that was all very helpful and led to this result. Madam President, we commend these 3 draft resolutions to the Assembly and hope that they can be adopted by consensus. I thank you very much.
I thank you for introducing the draft resolution on the 10-year policy on a moratorium and the review mechanism and the Rome Statute system. I now invite the Ms. Stéphane Louha, conseiller juridique de France, to introduce on behalf of the co-facilitators for cooperation the draft resolution on cooperation contained in document ICC-ASP23/L6.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Dear distinguished delegates, I have the honor, on behalf of Ambassador Zala Brune and Ambassador Bafai from Senegal, both co-facilitators for cooperation, the draft resolution on cooperation, which is ICC-ASP/23/L6. By ratifying the Statute of Rome, in particular under Chapter 9, we committed to supporting the court, and in particular its role in fighting against impunity for the most heinous crimes. And this is very important when it comes to cooperation. It's up to states, parties to assist the international organizations, regional organizations, and other states parties in this. And this was duly recorded in the plenary session on cooperation yesterday afternoon. This draft decision reaffirms the importance of this issue of cooperation when it comes to executing arrest warrants, in translating the Statute of Rome provisions into national law, freezing and seizure of assets, protecting and supporting court staff, etc., and also signing voluntary cooperation agreements. In particular, as of last year's resolution, there have been some developments, but the recommendations coming from the decision of June last year have now meant that cooperation should be straightforward from now on. In France, in the next few days, will be making a voluntary contribution to the fund of €15,000, particularly focused on the issue of arrests. This draft resolution recognizes the ongoing work of the co-facilitators, and we just want to say here again, we are extremely grateful for all of the hard work that has been done, and I'm sure that the court will agree, even though they don't always have the wherewithal to fulfill their mandate. The draft resolution also encourages the states parties to contribute to the Fund for Witness Relocation, and I'm happy to say that France will be shortly providing a voluntary contribution of €20,000 to this end. We encourage all states parties to incorporate into the draft resolution a paragraph reflecting our discussions from yesterday, and this paragraph I would read would go as follows: welcomes the plenary session discussion on cooperation, which was held in the 23rd session of the Assembly, and which was an opportunity for dialogue between the states parties, the court, and members of civil society on voluntary cooperation, as well as the more technical discussion on the manners in which states parties could strengthen their support to the court using existing tools, in particular by signing and ratifying the agreement on privileges and immunities of the court. Further welcomes the signing of a sentence enforcement agreement between Poland and the court during this assembly. The draft resolution that is tabled before you has reached a consensus in the Hague Working Group and has been approved by the Bureau. And so we submit it for your perusal, and we would respectfully suggest that it be adopted by consensus. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for introducing the draft resolution on cooperation and the language on the basis of the cooperation.
Microphone, please.
I thank you for introducing the draft resolution on cooperation and the language proposed on the basis of cooperation plenary. Distinguished delegates, we have heard the introduction of some of the resolutions of the 23rd session. I propose that we proceed to take action on the draft resolutions introduced at this morning's plenary at the plenary meeting to be held this afternoon. May we proceed accordingly. Thank you. The Assembly will now resume its consideration of Agenda Item 4, States in Arrears. At the first plenary meeting on 2nd December 24, I informed you that the Bureau had received requests for a waiver from the loss of voting rights for the 23rd session of the Assembly from Liberia and Venezuela, and decided to recommend that the Assembly grant these requests. At the same time, the Bureau agreed to take up in 2025 the issue of possible criteria for assessing requests for a waiver from the loss of voting rights pursuant to Article 112, paragraph 8 of the Rome Statute. I see that the delegation of Argentina wishes to take the floor. I give the floor to the delegate of Argentina.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and good morning. My delegation would like to support the considerations for Liberia and allow it to maintain its voting rights. But unfortunately, we are less favorable to the situation of Venezuela. But remember that Article 112, paragraph 8, does not give an automatic a waiver of loss of voting rights to states in arrears. And there is no automatic granting of this. And yet, it's what we seem to be happening here. Instead of analyzing whether these arrears were actually because of events outside the capacity of the state in question, we tend to just go with an automatic waiver. And when you look at the decisions from this assembly, we see that there is a consensus, and this means that a state party can access a waiver, even though it's not supposed to be automatic. We do think that the member states that have not been able to cooperate with the prosecutors' investigations and which have formed other kinds of blockages should not, therefore, be given the same treatment. To give them the same treatment as countries who have a genuine problem with meeting their levies, and considering that it has direct implications for the credibility of the court, we feel they should not be treated as so. Let's not forget that we need to see the trees as well as the forest. Argentina would be requesting that the court and that we should look carefully at the situation of Venezuela. The issue of international crimes is not something that everyone can take their own interpretation of. And this has been clearly set forth in our statutes. If you're going to fulfill your comply with the statute under Article 112, paragraph 8, you can see that this is not to be viewed in the same way as a bilateral problem. And that is why, Madam President, by way of conclusion, allow me to reiterate that all parties heard what I said on Monday. Argentina would find it unacceptable for this, for the government of Maduro to be given voting rights in this assembly. Venezuela cannot be considered a state where rule of law prevails and has been is clearly trampling on the rights and wishes of its population. We want to see the country maintaining its contributions to the good offices of this court and the functioning thereof, and we do not see that this state should be given equal treatment given the abuses of rights going on. Now, we understand that Argentina cannot impose its will on the Assembly, far from it, but we do think that this demonstrates my commitment, my country's commitment to the work of the court, and furthermore we see this statement as a reaffirmation of the need for action on the part of the court and in particular of the OTP, given the events ongoing in Argentina. Far be it from us to try to sway the decision of the Assembly, but we do want our statement to go on record. Thank you very much.
I thank you for your statement. It will be duly reflected in the records of the session. Having noted the statement by the representative of Argentina, and on the understanding that Bureau shall take up in 2025 the issue of possible criteria for assessing requests for a waiver from the loss of voting rights pursuant to Article 112, paragraph 8 of the Rome Statute, may I then take it that the Assembly exempts Liberia and Venezuela from the loss of voting rights? I see no objection. It is so decided. And I see that the delegation Venezuela wishes to take the floor.
Thank you, President, and good morning to everyone. My delegation would like to thank the Assembly for keeping the right to vote of my country, taking into account the situation that I once again have to say that we recognise and we're prepared to pay as soon as the situation improves with regards to the implementation of the rules applied to us. And in this sense, we're very pleased that the Assembly has not taken the path of sanctions, which would have been completely incoherent with the rejection that most of them have made in this August meeting with the threats, sanctions, and existing sanctions on the staff of the court in the development of their activities. Furthermore, I would also like to thank the Assembly at the same time for the different consultations that have been carried out over these days, and I would like to reject once again what was said by the representative of Argentina, who unfortunately continues to make shameful representation here with regards to diplomacy over the microphone. It claims to be the false defender of human rights, and this is counterproductive at the same time. When you take into account the comparisons that are made in impossible situations between a government which, like mine, which cooperates with the human rights, and others who criticize the resolutions of this own court.
without any doubt, it appears to us at least, interesting when, or if not, imprudent when it comes to the issue that a delegation claims to evaluate cooperation with the Office of the Prosecutor more than the Office of the Prosecutor does itself. There's an office in Caracas, and they have been doing a huge amount of work, and this is much more than any argument that could be put forward with regards to cooperation that my country is doing with the court and with its objectives under the Rome Statute. We do not want to make any gesture against Argentina, which is governed by a government which uses rhetoric and lies as principles of foreign policy. What we want to do and what we wish to do is say that we are convinced that the rules have to be respected, and taking into account Article 1082, we don't see automatic concession to Argentina or anyone else. The absence of payment is exclusively linked to the lack of possibilities that we have with regards to accessible resources due to the fact that measures are applied to us in an illegal way. This isn't just said by the United Nations, but this is something which is easily demonstrated. So once these measures are no longer having an effect, then we will be able to recover these payments and make them. And unfortunately, this is something we see in different fora as well, because the world is going towards a dangerous path of sanctions which breaks international law and furthermore prevents multilateral effective action. So, President, I will conclude with my intervention thanking this plenary once again and being very emphatic, not only in rejecting what was said by the representative of the Argentinian government, but in particular with regards to the thanks that we have the ASP to respect the specific rules that govern relations, which govern rules about delayments in payments and contributions. And thank you for listening, and thank you all.
I thank you for your statement, and I recognize the delegation of Canada. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you very much for your commitment to ensure that the Bureau works on matters of criteria for waivers. Very much share the concerns of our Argentinian colleagues' delegation. Important issue. Now there are still ongoing discussions about budget. Arrears is a genuine issue that needs to be addressed. The statute addresses this issue. Now, as we're coming to the end of the discussion on budget, I think that is very pertinent that we address the issue of arrears. Again, as I mentioned on Monday, there needs to be work in the Bureau in 2025 about those criteria so as to avoid those that use of time in plenary, and we come up with a structured approach to that. This is the second year that Canada makes that intervention. I want to put on notice that if there is no work in 2025 on this important matter, Canada might have to join in denying waiver. I cannot make the same statement next year as I did for the last two ASPs. Thank you.
I thank you for this statement. I do not see any other statements, and I would just note that the Assembly has thus concluded its consideration of Agenda Item 4. The Assembly will now resume its consideration of Agenda Item 12, election of the members of the Board of Directors of the Trust Fund for Victims. At the first plenary meeting, the Assembly did not elect the member of the Board of Directors of the Trust Fund for Victims to fill the seat allocated to the African group, since there were two candidates to that one seat. On 5th of December 24, the Embassy of Democratic Republic of the Congo has indicated in a note verbal that in the interest of consensus, the government had withdrawn the candidature of Ms. Jeanda Kayeruka-Mukaere for election to the Board of Directors of the Trust Fund for Victims. I thank the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo for its flexibility. There is therefore one candidate from the African group, Mr. Ibrahim Sori Yillah of Sierra Leone. And since the number of candidates corresponds to the number of vacant seats for the African group, namely one seat, I propose that the Assembly dispensed with the secret ballot and elect the candidate, Mr. Ibrahim Seri Yillah of Sierra Leone, by acclamation. Does the Assembly agree to elect Mr. Ibrahim Sori Yillah by acclamation? I see no objection. Mr. Ibrahim Sori Yillah from Sierra Leone is elected to the Board of Directors of the Trust Fund for Victims. I congratulate Mr. Yillah and wish him every success in his term of office. The Assembly. The Assembly has thus elected the following 5 members of the Board of Directors of the Trust Fund for Victims: Mr. Kevin Kelly from Ireland, Mr. Tarek Mohammad from Bangladesh, Mr. Andres Parmas from Estonia, Ms. Monica Jacqueline Cifuentes from Brazil, and Mr. Ibrahim Sori Yillah from Sierra Leone. We will now proceed to the drawing of lots to determine the length of office of the elected members. I wish to recall that resolution ICC-ASP23/20/resolution 5 provides in Annex 2 as follows. The board shall have 5 members who shall be elected for a term of 4 years and may be re-elected once. At the first election since the adoption of this resolution, 2 of then elected members of the board shall be selected by a lot to serve for a term of 2 years. I will now draw 2 names from among the 5 elected members. And I have checked that the envelope contains the 5 names and no other names. I will have to make sure that I have only 2 names. And these are the ones. And the first name on the paper is Monica Jacqueline Cifuentes. And the second one is Yillah Ibrahim Sori. The names, the 3 other elected members of the board will serve of 4 years. The terms of all members elected at this session shall begin on 6 December 2024. We have thus concluded our consideration of agenda item 12. The Assembly will now resume its consideration of agenda item 13, election of 5 members of the Committee on Budget and Finance. At the first plenary meeting on 2nd December 24, the Assembly decided to defer the election of the members of the Latin American and Caribbean group. I understand that we are now in a position to proceed to the election of a candidate to fill the seat allocated to the CRULAC. Since the number of candidates corresponds to the number of vacant seats for the group of Latin American Caribbean states, namely 1 seat, I propose that the Assembly dispense with the secret ballot and elect the candidate, Mr. Hector Felix Romero of Argentina, by acclamation. And I see that the delegation Venezuela wishes to take the floor. I give the floor to Venezuela.
Gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you very much, President. With regards to this matter, my country presented reservations. When it comes to the principle of reciprocity, we were surprised in the first presentation of this point. Taking into account what has happened, Venezuela doesn't want to block the consensus. Nevertheless, we would like to say that there isn't absolute consensus. What we would like to say is that we would like to go into this point and we would like to trust in the candidates who will be elected by this assembly representing Argentina, and the mandate will be we hope there will be no politicization of that mandate, and in that sense, we won't oppose the consensus, but we disassociate ourselves from that consensus. Thank you.
I thank you. Your statement will be duly reflected in the official records of this session. Does the Assembly agree to elect Mr. Hector Felix Romero from Argentina by acclamation? I see no objection. Mr. Hector Felix Romero from Argentina is elected to the Committee on Budget and Finance. I congratulate Mr. Romero and wish him every success in his term of office. The Assembly has thus elected the following 4 members of the Committee on Budget and Finance: Mr. Jae-woo Kim, Republic of Korea, Mr. Hector Felix Romero from Argentina, Mr. Mustafa Samate from Gambia, Ms. Glory Jeffrey Sindilo from United Republic of Tanzania. The members elected will serve for a term of 3 years from 1st January 2025 until the 31st December 27. In accordance with Resolution ICC-ASP22 Resolution 8, they may be re-elected for no more than 2 further terms of 3 years. I see the delegation of Argentina wishing to take the floor. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President. And I'm obliged once again to use the word, using up time and your patience and that of my colleagues. Argentina takes note of the disassociation of Venezuela with the decision to elect the GRULAC candidate to the Committee on Budget and Finance, which nevertheless isn't satisfactory, taking into account the systemic damage caused. Let me be clear about this. Venezuela must not have asked for to speak on this matter, first of all, with regards to keeping the Assembly on caution the whole 5 times, with the only point of punishing Argentina. Let me allow me to say once again what I said on Monday. The candidacy of Argentina was endorsed in time and in the GRULAC framework, following ordinary procedures, without Venezuela at any time or in any body opposing it. And it was taken into account by the GRULAC coordinator and all members of GRULAC, including the permanent